and good afternoon from Jakarta. Welcome to FPCI Middle Power Studies Network virtual public discussion titled Eyes on Saudi Arabia, How a Pivotal Middle Power is Raising its Strategic Game. I'm Lian, and I will be the master of ceremony for today's event. This public forum is brought to you by the Middle Power Studies Network, MPSN, a unit in FPCI dedicated to studying the role of middle power countries in the 21st century. FPCI MPSN engages scholars, policymakers, practitioners, and relevant stakeholders in middle power countries as well as around the globe to explore the trend where middle power is playing an increasingly active role in shaping the regional and global order. Today, I'm pleased to welcome over 250 participants from across 34 countries tuning into our channels. To name a few, we have audience from Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, India, Pakistan, China, United States, Ghana, and Malaysia. I would also like to welcome our distinguished panelists. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Abdul Aziz Sagir, founder and chairman of Gulf Research Center, GRC, and Professor Simon Mabon, Professor of International Politics at Lancaster University. And lastly, welcome also to Dr. M.D. Mudassir Quamar, Associate Professor at Center for West Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me hand the floor to Dr. Dino Patijalal, founder and chairman of FPCI, to lead the discussion this afternoon. Dr. Dino, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lian, and I want to thank all those who are joining our webinars today from 35 countries, and special thanks to Dr. Abdul Aziz Sagar, founder and chairman of Gulf Research Center, for joining our discussion, and also to Professor Simon Mabon from Lancaster University, and also Dr. Mudassir Quamar from Jawaharlal Nehru University. What I will do is I will spend the first 20 minutes or so talking with Dr. Abdul Aziz, and then I will invite Professor Simon and Dr. Mudassir to respond and add more food for thoughts to our discussions. So maybe I'll start with Dr. Abdul Aziz. You know, Dr. Abdul Aziz.
I don't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now?
I don't hear you.
Okay, well, they can
You hear me, but I don't hear you.
Okay.
I can't listen to you.
Okay, can the others hear me? Professor Simon, you can hear me, yes? Okay, Dr. Mudassir can hear me. Maybe it's on your end. Maybe your staff can fix the audio reception from your end. Is that? I'm going to keep talking just to make sure that you hear me. Yeah. Hello? Yeah. Just give us a second. Maybe there's a mute button or something. And while they're fixing it, I just want to congratulate Saudi for the victory over Argentina during the World Cup, which was a lot of people lost a lot of money that day for that totally unexpected victory. But well done. Yeah, I think the only team that beat Argentina in the World Cup. Yeah. So, can you hear me now? Yes. Yeah, I can see they're reconnecting. By the way, Dr. Simon, how is the weather in the UK?
It's miserable. It's dark, it's gloomy, it's rainy, it's wet. You don't want me to bring the mood down anymore.
Okay, this is a good reason for you to go to Indonesia and join the weather in Bali, for example.
So, very much, yes.
So, I was in Washington, D.C. last week, and it was 70 degrees in January. So it's a bit strange. Yeah, maybe it's a sign of climate change. Yeah. How is it in New Delhi, Dr. Mudassir?
It's very unusual here also. It's raining in February. It's unusually cold. Yeah, I mean, we can see that impact of climate change or whatever. Yes. You know, it's there in everywhere.
Yes.
very unusual for Delhi to actually receive such rain in February, in early
Yes.
February.
Yes. Okay. Good. Dr. Abdul Aziz, can you hear me now? No? Okay. I think it must be at your end because the other two can hear me. And okay, the moment you can hear me again, please raise your hand. Can you hear me now? Oh, Alhamdulillah.
Yes. Finally.
Okay, Dr. Abdul Aziz, thank you. Thank you. So, Dr. Abdul Aziz, as you know, we at FPCI is running the Middle Powers Studies Network. And what we notice in recent times, there's just been a lot of initiatives that we are seeing from Saudi Arabia. You had a very successful presidency of the Arab League, where Syria was reintegrated after a decade-long suspension. There was the Arab Islamic Summit that produced a communique over what's happening with Israel and Gaza. There was the first time ASEAN GCC Summit. President Jokowi from Indonesia traveled there. There was a Saudi Africa Summit where 50 African leaders, including AU, went to Saudi. I mean, I can list so many things, but it seems there is unusually elevated game pursued by Saudi Arabia in terms of its foreign policy. So can you first give us a flavor of what's going on and also explain what is driving this elevated level of foreign policy activism? Please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends where you are in this world with us in this webinar. Thank you very much for your kind invitation, and it's a great pleasure for me to participate in this panel this morning. The Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, in his speech in front of the Majlis al-Shura, which is our Saudi parliament, as we call it, he did say that in 2023, we have received almost 100 head of state to Saudi Arabia. So receiving 100 head of state between ASEAN, African, Central Asia, Arab, Muslims, many of those countries, and of course, many other European head of state and a ministerial and cabinet member and so on. I think Saudi Arabia, of course, is understanding their role in the Arab world and in the Muslim world also, and internationally. In 2023, also Saudi have been invited to join the BRICS. Also, Saudi Arabia is a member of the G20, and it's a strong member of the G20 with a GDP of almost $1.7 billion and the level of growth 4% in 2023. But still, Saudi in the region, first it started in the January 2021 summit. January 22 is trying to bring the whole Gulf country back into what it used to be after the disturbed relation that happened between some of the Gulf countries. But that still have sent a very clear signal also to the other country in the region, i.e. Turkey, Iran also, and starting the talk with Israel based in a very clear conditions that normalization with Israel would need to be after reaching a satisfactory agreement between the Palestinian and the Israeli, whether it's a two-state solution or other agreement to be reached between the two sides. But still, looking at Iran and the rapprochement that took place also in March 2023, that's also have sent a signal of how Saudi Arabia play a very important role for the regional security, resolving problems, expanding a peaceful and acceptable relation. in territory like Sudan, they did mediation. In Ukraine also, we had our own position. But also, all of this was based on focusing on Saudi Arabia key national interests and understanding that the US is historically the traditional partner, but at the same time, Saudi have expanded to have a very good relation to other countries and other territory, such as China, Russia, and also strengthening with India. So, on one hand, yes, the US relation is extremely vital and important, but at the same time, Saudi have decided to diversify in its international country network and a good relation. So that being said, I think Saudi have also sent a very clear signal, whether during the visit of President Biden to the Jeddah summit in 2022, or for the Chinese president visit to Riyadh also in December 2022. So at the same time, Saudi have clearly indicated, yes, the US is our traditional historical partner, and the West, the European country, but at the same time, we are open for the rest of the world because we would like to maintain a balance and a good relation. Saudi Arabia is not in support of going back to a Cold War era, neither in support of a single hegemony. Saudi still would like to see a balance of power, diversified one, and also look into the area where there is a growth, prosperity, and also contribute to the international peace. You know, we did what we can for the environment issues, and I think that was extremely important, to look at what we have done for the environment, for the global energy market through the OPEC and OPEC Plus, also through the mega international contribution to the poor country through the Saudi aid program, and also through the direct enhancing the relation. For instance, a country like Indonesia, we do $7 billion with it, but it has a great potential for growth. And with the ASEAN in total, we have about 137 billion. With the Gulf country, the total investment from the Gulf countries to the ASEAN is about close to 75 billion, and the ASEAN country in the region is about close to 24, which is not to our satisfactory. We look forward for enhancing the economic relation with the ASEAN, and I think the second summit will take place in 2025, and that's very important to see. But this year's summit between the ASEAN and the Gulf countries was extremely useful and important because we enjoy a very good relation. So I'll take it from here, and then I will be, of course, open to you for any question you would like to.
Sure. Thank you for that. That was very deep and comprehensive. Dr. Abdul Aziz, does Saudi Arabia consider itself a middle power? And if it does, what is that definition of being a middle power country? And then also I want to follow up. A lot of countries pursue foreign policies on the basis of values. Yeah, obviously we talked to an American foreign policy makers. The notion of values are very strongly implanted, and many Western countries also. For Saudi Arabia, what is the particular value that you pursue that underpins your foreign policy? So those two questions: foreign policy, middle power, and values.
Yes, Saudi is still it's a key country on the Arab countries and the Islamic country. We host the OIC organization, the Organization for Islamic Countries in Saudi Arabia, and we go through the various circuits. First into the regional GCC country, we enjoy a very important and strong relation, and this organization have been functioning quite well since 1981. So we're satisfied with that one, but this have kept the direct and immediate neighborhood relation and a very close tie, whether security-wise, and just recently it has been announced about the regional views and on the regional security from the region. Then we have the Arab countries where we have an outstanding relation. And as you know, Saudi Arabia this year still hosting the presidency of the Arab League and the Arab countries, which of course the summit was extremely important in Riyadh. Many of the subjects has been discussed, and including inviting the president of Ukraine to attend that Arab summit meeting in Jeddah when it was hosted in 2023. At the same time, regionally, we would like to have a zero problem, as they call it, which means a very good based in a mutual interest relation with regional countries like Iran, like Turkey, and many of those ones. Expand that to the larger territory, to the global. I think we have listed, and you have listed also the interesting blocks in the world that Saudi Arabia have developed, and in really doing a great relation with most of those, whether in Asia, Africa, even the Caribbean countries. And a member of those one, they had their own summit also in Riyadh with Saudi Arabia. So that goes into the international. But also, Saudi have been invited to the BRICS, and that's a very important one. Not yet have confirmed their participation, but still the invitation is there, and I'm sure Saudi still enjoy a very good relation to most of the BRICS country members in that one. The values that we believe in is non-intervention, non-aggression. We don't want to interfere in people's affairs or countries' affairs. We would like to maintain a good relation based on the mutual interest. At the same time, we have our own values when it comes to leadership of the Muslim world, and we have our own Arab cultural values when it comes to our Arab belonging. At the same time, we build our own capacity based on a very clear vision on 2020-30 to build a domestic growth in Saudi Arabia, build our own military and security to protect ourselves and to stop any sort of an external aggression coming to Saudi Arabia, maintain an excellent alliances and a multi-alliances in the world, not only with one bloc as it used to be historically, but now we've been open to different parts of the world. If you are in Riyadh next week, you will see the biggest defense show in Riyadh, and you will see many countries from all over the world coming in. Saudi is building their own local industrial military capability to enhance their own internal and regional security by being able to have, because one of the things that Saudi have learned, of course, very clearly, it is very difficult to depend on just one external power. But it's still diversification is important, maintaining the relation with all different parties. And they have a great and a very clear understanding of the value of each one of those blocks and countries that they deal with.
Thank you. I note you referred earlier about evolving relations with China, and certainly we noticed that China has become a more active presence in the Middle East, and we were quite intrigued by China's role in the Saudi-Iran rapprochement. I'm just wondering, can you comment more on you think China's role, geopolitical role and geoeconomic role in the Middle East, and the evolving relations between Saudi Arabia and China?
Well, don't forget, China today is the largest trade partner with Saudi Arabia. We sell almost 20% of our oil export goes to China, and also China, we are one of their big partners in the Middle East. For example, the trade relation between Saudi and China goes above $130 billion alone. So that's, you can see the trade relation, which is equal to the whole ASEAN country with the whole GCC country. So that also shows a very important size of the relation. At the same time, I think China involvement, China before never wanted to be involved in a regional security or even geopolitical situation. But after the president visit to Saudi Arabia and the GCC and summit that took place, I think China realized that without addressing the regional security issue, it will be very difficult, because look at today what's happening in the Red Sea, and that's part of the regional security issue. Look at what happened in the maritime security and on the energy security. Those issues are extremely important. And since China, they get about 40% of their energy out of the Gulf countries, well, which I said also 20% only from Saudi Arabia, that's about 2 million barrels a day. That makes it very vital and very important. China used the good occasion of being a great partner to both Saudi Arabia and Iran, and suggested the mediation and brought the two parties together, which resulted to the 9th or 10th of March announcement of the agreement between Saudi and Iran. But let me verify that here, this agreement between Saudi and Iran is basically addressing the technical issue and the unilateral, but not the multilateral. In other words, yes, they have agreed to reestablish diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Embassies were opened in Tehran and in Riyadh. And the assurance from the Iranian side that the protection of the Saudi diplomat and the Saudi premises will be well taken care by under the Vienna Treaty. And then we move to the second issue also of the aggression and also interventions. And Iran have assured, because still Saudi, remember the attack on our two critical oil facility, which have cost Saudi Arabia more than $5 billion in 1 month. And then it did stop 50% of the export. However, Saudi, alhamdulillah, they were great in addressing those issues very quickly, restoring the facility and back again into the market. And the intervention, of course, sometimes Iran, they used to do the sectarianism side in justifying their own internal intervention. This has been assured from the Iranian, so this is fine. I think the last issue with Iran is the regional issues, and the regional issue go from regional security, like the maritime security, like the energy security, interventionist policy, expansionist policy, using sectarianism as a reason for additional expansion, support of extremism in the neighborhood country. I think we're going through 3 steps. Step 1 is the de-escalation with Iran, which has taken place very good and positive signal from both sides. The second is the normalization, which have taken place already by technically opening the embassies so you can have direct talk and deliver the direct messages and so on. And then third is the cooperation. And on the cooperation, it's difficult to move to that level if we don't have the what we call sanction be removed from Iran, because as long as there is a sanction, there will be difficult to do any commercial or economic collaboration. However, what we are going to judge in Saudi Arabia is the Iranian behavior. How do they behave? And we have seen lately some escalation by some of their parties that they support, whether it's in Iraq or in Syria or in Lebanon, or also some other area. You know, we still like to see a serious de-escalation and not using their arms left and right in rising an issue related to regional security. But you've mentioned before, do we see Saudi Arabia as a middle power? Yes. Like Indonesia, for instance. Indonesia also is a big Muslim country, and they with a great population, with a $3.7 trillion ability in terms of economic, with a great level of growth. So also Indonesia. So if there will be a stronger collaboration between Indonesia and Saudi Arabia, definitely we can see also a better role for two good and important countries. We have seen them together touring the world with the other foreign minister from Jordan, Egypt, and the other country. in trying to deliver the message about the Israeli aggression against the Palestinians in Gaza. And that shows the closer and important role of two countries, how do they play globally.
Thank you. The last question before I turn to Dr. Simon and Dr. Mudassir. Dr. Abdul Aziz, in the light of what is going on between Israel and Palestine now, especially in Gaza, we appreciate your push, Saudi's push for a two-state solution. And two questions from that. One is, what is the prospect of that now? Because I don't see any country trying to mediate between Israel and Palestine at the moment. There's less support for two-state solution, both in Israel and Palestine, but especially in Israel. And people are more and more skeptical. I remember in the year 2000, I was working for President Yudhoyono, and there was a discussion with President Bush. President Bush said two-state solution will happen in 2 years. And that was 20 years ago, right? It hasn't happened. So first question is, how realistic, what is the prospect of that two-state solution from Saudi's perspective? And secondly, Iran is still not supportive of the idea of two-state solution. Are you counting also on Iran to get on board at some point on the push for two-state solution?
This Saudi initiative in 2002, when it started as a two-state solution at that time, I think they tried to kill it at that time by not allowing President Yasser Arafat to attend the summit in Beirut. And we all know the follow-up of that one. I think Saudi Arabia is still insisting, even in any discussion with regard to the normalization, we need to see a workable solution between the Israeli and the Palestinian. Now, in case if they have a better idea than the two-state solution, I mean, this morning I was listening to the news, and it looks like the State Department are trying to study an issue of recognizing the state of Palestine. We all understand if there is no real strong pressure from the US toward Israel, we're not going to see a result, because there is the extreme side on both sides, and the Palestinian side being represented by Hamas and Jihad, and also by the extreme right wing in Israel, have never wanted to recognize a two-state solution. And you are right, is the Iranian foreign minister, he said, the only thing we agree with Israel is a one state. But I don't think that's a workable solution. You said there is no initiative. I think there are many different track 2 discussion currently is going on. And I think there is no war will not have an end. The Iraqi invasion of Kuwait have resulted to Madrid, and that resulted to Oslo. Other one. So I think we might see something out of the Gaza crisis. All what we are hoping and wishing at this moment is not just to have a temporary ceasefire. What we are all hoping for is to see a permanent ceasefire, allowing humanitarian support to go to the Palestinian. We fully understand the right of existence for both sides, and we're not saying that there is no right of existence to any side. But at the same time, how far can Israel and its government continue to be in such a situation? Have they really achieved the goal after 4 months of bombarding Gaza, killing close to 30,000 people, with 65,000 injured, and many are missing, and destroying 70% of the property and the building in Gaza? I think the Palestinians showed that this is their country. They're not willing to move. They're not willing to leave it, and they will stay there even if they. So I think the message also is clear to the Israeli government. You cannot get rid of the Palestinian. And the Palestinian also, they have a clear message now that you cannot get rid of the Israeli. So we have to find a formula where both can live next to each other, where both can respect territorial-wise, and where both focus on their own, people and their own political system. I think, the crisis will push for. I know some of the European countries are working in some sort of initiative, but at least they were far more honest by saying we have a limited ability to pressure Israel and to make it effective. So we are back all, and this is where, for instance, country like Indonesia, many of the countries that they have a good relation to the Arab Muslim world and to the US is to try to extend that sort of pressure to the US. And we all know it's a year of election in the US, so it's a bit sensitive who's going to do what and who's going to benefit out of that one. But as I said, there's no war in this war. There will be an end for any war. The real hope is to reach a workable, whether it's a two-state solution with a slightly marginally modified border or a modified number of refugees, as according to some of the Israeli thinking, or stick to that initiative as it was there. But I'm sure with the multinational effort and pressure in Israel and in the US to pressure Israel, because we don't have any economic relation with Israel to leverage with it. We don't have any political relation with Israel to leverage with it. And we don't have any sort of pressure that we can exercise. And it's not our intention to go for a higher escalation also in the region. I think with Iran, yes, they are a great supporter of Hamas. They have trained them, they have helped them, they have endorsed all the Islamist resistant group in the region. But I think in the end, it's up to the Palestinian leadership. What we need to see is a stronger Palestinian agreement between themselves and having a unified position that will help in any negotiation to bring a unified Palestinian position. Our job in the Arab Islamic world and also in those countries that they endorse fair and justice and the right of living and right of existence of a human being, we will all support and endorse, this sort of thing.
Thank you. May I now turn to Professor Simon from Lancaster University. Professor, we've heard the explanations from Dr. Abdul Aziz on Saudi foreign policy. How do you see this? I mean, do you see an elevated activism of Saudi foreign policy? And again, what is driving it? Yeah. What is the ambition? Yes. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you to all of your team and to Dr. Abdulaziz for his very insightful remarks. I largely agree. I think that Saudi Arabia is an interesting moment in its history and in global history as well. And how it chooses to deal with this, I think, is going to be incredibly telling for us in terms of understanding what's going on in the kingdom, in the Gulf, in the Middle East, in the world, but also theoretically with regard to, well, what does this concept of a middle power actually tell us about what's going on? So I think there's two broad sort of themes coming out of this. And the first with regard to the kingdom and what it's trying to do, I think we can see in recent years there's been a concerted effort to position the kingdom as a robust, stable, safe pair of hands, influential, pragmatic player in the region at a time when there is general uncertainty, instability, questions about the capabilities or aspirations of other powers. The kingdom has sought to assuage some of those concerns by sort of positioning itself as a player that is able to be moderate, to be pragmatic, to take quote unquote sensible decisions. And we see that most recently in the past sort of 3 years, I think, although the roots of it go much earlier, of course. We see it broadly within the growing socioeconomic pragmatism that is taking place at home, but also taking place abroad. We see it with its growing diplomatic initiatives. We see it with the dialogue with Iran, the normalization agreement, with the normalization pause now, of course, with Israel. And I think that points to a pragmatic turn in Saudi foreign policy making, a pragmatic sense of acknowledging that the way in which the region has been ordered, has been organized, has not been beneficial to the people of the region, to the states of the region, and has not attracted the sorts of external engagement that the region wants. We know that over the past century, the region has been penetrated by external powers with military ambitions, with extractionist ambitions, with colonialist ambitions, much like many other parts of the world. And yet that has not been to the benefit of the people of the region. And I think the Saudis under Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, of course, have realized that there is a better way for the kingdom to engage with global politics. And that's to capitalize on the dominance of this sort of neoliberal capitalism by positioning themselves within these broader capitalist entanglements and to take advantage of the resources, the opportunities that it has. We see that, of course, with Vision 2030. We see it with the developments that have been put in place under that banner of Vision 2030. But that alone is not enough for the kingdom to completely pivot away from how politics has been done in the region. And I think that's where we see a shift in foreign policy as well, this more pragmatic shift away from how things used to be done, away from a military intervention in Yemen, for example, towards a more pragmatic, I keep using this word pragmatic because I think that captures what's going on in many cases, a pragmatic foreign policy agenda that is driven by national interest, a very much a realist national interest about socioeconomic growth, about influence, and about positioning the kingdom as a viable, attractive state in global capitalist entanglements that is a state that is broadly stable and able to make people money, to put it crudely. And its vision, its transformation is in part about demonstrating that it can do that for global powers, for global capitalist actors and organizations, but it's about transforming the social dynamics of the kingdom internally as well, all in pursuit of this pragmatic repositioning. Or at least this is how I read it and how I understand what's going on there.
Thank you. I just want to follow on that, Simon. Do you think Saudi Arabia is developing a ambition and confidence to be a global player? I say this because there are a lot of middle powers, right? They're active only in the region, but actually very few actually are going to the next level of actually establishing themselves as a global player. Is that what Saudi is trying to do as well, you think? Yeah.
I think that's the $1 million question, or perhaps the $1 billion question, to put it more appropriately here. We've in previous years talked about aspiring middle powers. I was at an event about 7 years ago talking about this very concept of middle powers, and the sort of the theme of that workshop was to talk about Gulf states, Saudi, Qatar, UAE, as sort of aspiring middle powers. And the conclusion then, and this was probably about 2017, was that there were very few conventional middle powers in the region at that time. Now that has changed, of course. And I guess the answer to your question is, well, are we dealing with aspiring global powers, or is there a thought that maybe the way in which we conceptualize some of these distinctions between global and middle perhaps needs to be reconsidered? I'm not sure that it's quite as static as we have middle powers, and then we have global powers that states aspire to be at all times. I think there are perhaps instances where Saudi Arabia would be considered a global power. Of course, its Islamic credentials, for example, its influence in sport, its influence on the global economy. Those are arenas in which it would very much be considered a global power. But then to consider Saudi Arabia as a global power under some of the more traditional realist assumptions about military capabilities, etc., well, that doesn't seem quite right. So maybe we need a more flexible way of reconceptualizing some of these ideas about global and middle. But in the empirical sense, Saudi Arabia is certainly aspiring to achieve global significance and global influence, but I think it acknowledges that it is limited in the areas in which that significance and influence can be achieved, but it says that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me go to Dr. Mudassir now. Dr. Mudassir, you've been watching Saudi Arabia for a long time. That's your specialty. Please share with us your take on recent development in Saudi Arabia's foreign policy. Please.
First of all, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for FPCI for having me here and your team. And thank you for the comments by Dr. Abdulaziz Saqer and Professor Simon. I think both of them have already put a very good context to what is happening as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned. Let me try and contextualize even it in further, especially in terms of global events. Now, if one looks at Saudi Arabia conventionally, there are three pillars of Saudi foreign policy: oil, that is energy, Islam, and the strategic alliance with the United States. Over the past, I would say, around quarter of a century, because of developments at systemic level and at the subsystemic level, especially in the Middle East, and then obviously also developments within Saudi Arabia. All these three have undergone some changes, some shifts, and this also has led to what we are looking at today. That is the crux of the question today: is Saudi Arabia a middle power? Is it trying to have more proactive role in the world, increase its significance in the world, and then whether to what extent that has been effective in that sense. If one looks at, let's say, around 25 years, there are 5 events which have impacted the thought process or Saudi foreign policy attitude. And they are instrumental in understanding what is happening today and how Saudi foreign policy has evolved. Obviously, the 9/11 and the US invasion of Iraq in 2003, the recession, the global economic recession in 2007 and 9 during that period, and then its impact, the events of Arab Spring since 2010, continuing, and then rise of the Asian economies, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and then the Southeast Asian economies, ASEAN as a block, economic bloc, and at the domestic level, the rise of Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman. And this is not just the rise of the person, the prince, but a reflection of the Saudi aspirations, the aspirations of the Saudi youth. And if one look at all these things, this has changed the Saudi external behavior in a fundamental way. Firstly, if you look at in the Middle East, obviously there is regional order and the balance of power after 2003, US invasion, it completely changed. In some ways, it was shattered. There was increasing regional strategic competition and all. So that kind of changed Saudi attitude towards how it looks at regional stability. And obviously, secondly, if one looks at it, it also led to increased internal and external security threats for Saudi Arabia. And then there were also ideological competitions. Now, if one looks at the economic point of view, there are lots of things happening in terms of the energy transition, the impact of climate change on the energy transition, and then the rise of Asian economies, which means that for Saudi Arabia, it became very important to look east. So that process also contributed to the change in Saudi attitude. Thirdly, if one looks at it, the whole global geopolitical situation, when US obviously continues to be the biggest power in some sense in the world. Professor Simon was talking about conventional ideas from a very real politic sense of view. US remains, but it no longer is the only player in the game. There is China, there is Russia, there are, we are talking about middle powers, so obviously a gamut of middle powers, India, Indonesia, many in the region, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others. So, and finally, if one looks at it, there is the Saudi aspiration is also linked to a sense of, Saudi national identity, greater sense of Saudi national identity, increased sense of Saudi national identity, which is linked to the aspirations, greater aspirations towards playing a role in the region and in the world. That doesn't mean, Saudi Arabia was not a power before. It always had certain degree of influence as far as the energy market was concerned, or is concerned, or the Islamic world is concerned. And then this Saudi middle power aspirations, or Saudi greater aspirations in the region, in the world, through G20 and then now joining of BRICS, they have all kind of convalesced into that. In terms of impact, I think the nature of relationship between Saudi Arabia and United States have changed. From alliance to a partnership, and I think that is something which is very, very important to recognize. There is a greater emphasis in Saudi Arabia on strategic autonomy, and then a degree of multi-alignment with external powers. So United States, there is a degree of partnership. There is a mutuality of interest. But then Saudi Arabia is also expanding to relations. For example, if we talk about trade figures, it is China, then India, and Japan, Korea, UAE. These are the 5 biggest trading partners of Saudi Arabia. So in some ways, I think what we are looking at today from, Dr. Sagar was talking about during his intervention, about 100 heads of state, visiting Saudi Arabia in 2023. I think that in some ways is reflective of what Saudi Arabia is trying to do. It is trying to place itself in a position where it can play a role in the region to stabilize the region, and then to contribute to the global, geoeconomic integration with the region and outside. And that is something which is what we are seeing as far as.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mudassir. Let me now turn back to Dr. Abdul Aziz. Dr. Abdul Aziz, I mean, a decade or two ago, whenever we talk about Saudi Arabia's foreign policy, usually the term Wahhabism is mentioned as a factor in Saudi foreign policy. I wonder if you can just give us an update on that. How much is it still a factor in Saudi's engagement with the world? And of course, if any of the two discussants want to comment on this, you're also most welcome. Please.
As you know, Saudi Arabia is a Muslim country and is a leader of the Islamic countries by having Mecca and Medina. People, they come for the Hajj and Umrah here, and we're hoping to be able to receive more than 30 million a year from the Muslim world to perform their Umrah. Wahhabism, I think it's an old story, is no longer existing in the Saudi agenda or even talk or even a notion at this stage. Because he was a noble man, lives in Dar'iyah. He wanted to push for more of a restriction to the Islam, which was fine at the time when he started, but at the same time, Saudi Arabia believe in a moderate and a non-aggression, non-violent, non-fanatic. You know, this is what Saudi Arabia believe in today, and not really going to the extreme and respecting other religions. You have seen how the Muslim League organization, which is led by a Saudi former Minister of Justice, that have toured the world and talked to the different nations, different religions, different parties, you know, expressing what we call at-tasamuh in the Islam, whereby you respect other religions, other culture. And Saudi Arabia have taken the initiative before for the multilateral, or what we call interfaith dialogue. And the interfaith dialogue was based before in Vienna. Now it moved to I think Abdullah Interfaith Organization, and that's basically to accept everybody in every religious and every sector and engage with them as a human being. Definitely, Saudi respect the international law, the human rights laws, and all of those issues. But also, if you allow me, you know, just to catch up a little bit on the middle power, why Saudi Arabia, you know, still believe on their role in that one. I think Saudi Arabia still possesses 17% of the global oil reserve, so it has its own energy value, as you know, the doctors said, the previous speakers, thanks to what he said, and also to the professor. That's also carry a very important, and not only possessing a 17% of the global oil reserve, but also playing a significant role in also with the non-OPEC member country. And we have seen how OPEC Plus have played a role in stabilizing the market, the relation between the supplier and the demand. Also, it is the largest economy in the Middle East, in one way or another. Third, it has a very clear vision. In fact, in 2027 or 28, Saudi Arabia is going to review their 2040, and we're going to go from that one. So back to the religious issue, we respect every religion. We respect people's belief. And I still remember in the Madrid on the interfaith dialogue the first time, the dilemma was there. So there was even those whom they have a cultural belief and not a very specific religious belief.
Thank you. I want to follow up with a question. I was asking earlier, what is the biggest driver in Saudi's foreign policy activism? And I remember last time I was in Riyadh, and this was quite recent during that big tourism conference. Yeah, and everybody says that Riyadh feels very different now. Yeah. A lot more relaxed, and you see a lot of reforms and everything, and I'm aware that there is very ambitious plan to establish Saudi Arabia as a tourism hotspot in the region, and I think your target of attracting tourists is more than the tourists that would go to France. I hear something like that, right? And then there's a lot of very ambitious reforms being undertaken by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. I want to get a sense of how much do you think this domestic drive for reforms, shaping Saudi Arabia's foreign policy ambition. And for Simon and Mudassir, if you want to add to this, jump in by all means. But please, Dr. Abdul Aziz.
Yeah, figures sometimes, although they may look strange when they are announced, but I think time have told us that we should never be surprised with any figure to be presented if there is a clear vision for it. And Saudi knows that no matter what figure they mention, they understand, and the Saudi government side, we need to build infrastructure to support such a tourism plan. Now you have two types of tourism that they are coming to perform their Hajj or Umrah, and again the location is limited. They have, they go to a similar location, performing almost similar thing at the same time. So there are some limitation with certain things, but at the same time, if you look at archaeology and when you look at Al-Ula, that area, by the way, most of the previous prophets have passed through that area, whether Abraham or Musa or Jesus or Muhammad or all the prophets have crossed, and with their old caravan, crossing from that area. So we have a huge archaeology, whether it's in Al-Ula in the north or even in the south, close to Najran and so on. Many of the tourism they are coming to discover, which was before very difficult to get visa. Saudi today have opened to so many countries in obtaining your visa. You can do it in line. It's a matter of few minutes sometime when you are able to get your visa, ticket, and organize your trip to Saudi Arabia. Yes, Saudi is hosting also the Expo 2030. We forget to mention that. And that Expo today, Riyadh, we're going to see it double. Riyadh is going to build more than 100,000 rooms in the hotels business, because that's needed, to support all the tourism, all the inflow of people, all the new corporate movement, and all the desire for doing business in Saudi. Also, Saudi have taken a great initiative in the Giga project. This is the first time we hear about Giga project in Neom, the Red Sea, Gidea. We have 1,900 kilo in the Red Sea alone, so you can well imagine that there will be a lot of attraction also in the diving, scuba, and cruising, and many of those. I think for the Saudi, honestly, they feel with the new young leadership of His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, we start discovering many things we were not, we just forget about. Many of the young couples, they used to love to go to some of the island in Indonesia or in Maldives or so in the old days. And now they discover they have a beautiful island in Saudi Arabia, close to 1,000 islands we have in Saudi Arabia. Only in Neom, the island that will be developed, close to 30 islands. The number of hotels in that area, only on that, from Al-Aqaba to Neom, is close to 300 hotels, with the major capacity building. So I think it's great to have that clear vision. It's great to work hard for it. We understand the challenges that we are going to go through to achieve such things. But I think if there is a will, there will be a way. And I'm sure all that will, and the enthusiasm, when you see it on the coming to Riyadh and see the energy and the vibe that really saying, look, we need to move, we need to do it. And you look at also other territory, we start creating a royal commission, a higher authority in each one of the provinces in Saudi Arabia to encourage competition between them, to look at core competence of what they have, the specificity, for instance, in that territory or zone, and what they need to develop. It's a great dynamic. What I can say, it's a great dynamic that we are even having a hard time to catch up. If I look at all the event calendar this year in Riyadh, I think I'll be lucky if I can attend some of it, because sometime in the same day you have Giga project, you have so many trade shows, you have so many business councils, meetings, taking place, international event is taking place. And, this is all for the positive, hosting World Cups, Winter Games, the Asian Winter Games, attracting all of these things. Yes, we are open now to the rest of the world. We are welcoming everybody to come, whether you want to go for your religious performance or you would like to discover the archaeology and the nature side of Saudi Arabia. And this is the big change that we.
Thank you. Let me ask Dr. Simon. the question of this image what do you call it? Image makeover of Saudi Arabia is quite incredible. I want to add also to what Dr. Abdul Aziz says. I was blown away when I learned that Saudi Arabia is hosting the Asian Winter Games 2028, right? And I've been telling my countrymen, and no one believes me. No way, not in Saudi Arabia, a Winter Olympics. But apparently that's in the plans, a very ambitious plan, and we wish them well. You just won Expo for 2030, right? Beating Korea and other destinations as well. I guess my question is, how is this image makeover being perceived in the West? Yeah. And to Dr. Mudassir, my question to you is, are you speaking to us from India? And India, as we all know, is aiming to be a leader of the global South, yeah, and is actually doing quite well on that, yeah. What is your view on how Saudi Arabia is being perceived in the global South? Can Saudi Arabia lead the global South, and does it have that ambition to lead the global South? Yeah. So Dr. Simon first, and then Dr. Mudassir.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add to that impressive list of things that will keep Dr. Abdulaziz busy over the next few years, there is, of course, the World Cup as well in 2034. So I would suggest buying a very big calendar to keep yourself nice and organized, Dr. Abdulaziz.
But Messi won't be
otherwise
playing,
you might struggle.
Yeah. Lionel Messi will not be playing in 2034, unfortunately.
That's what you think. But I think the fact that the Saudis have been able to get that over the line says something about that longer term vision, despite a lot of pressure from other states around the world to compete, and pressure from the West to stop FIFA from letting the World Cup go back to the Gulf so close to Qatar 2022. So I think your question is a delicate one, but a very important one. So if I boil it down, your question is, how is Saudi Arabia being perceived in the West as amidst all of this transformation? And I guess the answer is not well. And that short answer is deeply problematic, because when you look at the sort of the opinion pieces that are manifesting in various sort of daily newspapers, in think tanks over here, there is a lot of Orientalism, there's a lot of xenophobia, a lot of deep-seated suspicion, there's a lot of, dare I say, racism, Islamophobia. And this all came to a head, I think, with the Saudi Football League, and with the I think it was last summer, when a lot of Premiership football players decided to reject contract offers from other teams in Europe to go to Saudi Arabia for the money, quote unquote, for the money. And this was a real moment that people in the West, in the UK, across Europe, were incredibly critical of the Saudi project and of the players themselves for giving up on their careers to go and chase lots of money. And it prompted a lot of derogatory remarks, a lot of condemnation of Saudi Arabia. This is me commenting on the landscape, just to make this clear. This isn't me saying this. This is the landscape in which the coverage sort of took place. And what was interesting was that there was very little coverage of the fact that a large number of the players that were going to Saudi were Muslims, who had expressed the desire to go and live and play in the Saudi state, to be close to Mecca and Medina. And to reduce it all to money was crass, and it also sort of opened up these broader problematic lazy stereotypes and assumptions about what the Saudi state is trying to do. Scholars of sort of critical race and post-colonial studies can do deep dives into some of this discourse, and it will paint a very, very dark, very bleak picture for many people in the West. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. But I think there's also a slight concern amongst policymakers that there is a new powerful figure on the scene, that Saudi Arabia is able to exert influence in the region on global politics. Whether it's considered a global or a middle power, it is able to exert influence, and significant influence, on global politics. And I think that's a cause for concern for some. Of course, it's also seen as an opportunity by more pragmatic-minded people. It's seen as an opportunity by a great many. So it's kind of a mixed reception. There is the very dark, very problematic, racist, xenophobic, orientalist tropes that continue to resonate and must be called out. There's the slightly more pragmatic, suspicious, realist fearing of another influential player. Then there's the more pragmatic, well, this is actually a transactional opportunity. And there has been some of that narrative account of, well, this actually provides opportunities. And I should say that with those opportunities, they're not just in the kingdom, but one of the football teams in my family is Newcastle United, which has been taken over by the Saudi PIF. And the transformation of Newcastle in pursuit of a vision, and again, I go back to what you were saying, Dr. Abdulaziz, there is a vision for making these numbers real. And that vision is having a manifest transformation of Newcastle and its surrounding areas that have been hugely deprived of funding by the British government itself. So it's saying something that it's taken Saudi investment to come and revive an area of the Northeast. So it's a mixed bag, I guess, in response to your question.
Thank you, Simon. Dr. Mudassir, Saudi Arabia and Global South.
Yes, thank you. I think let me just, on the Indian view, let me just add to what Simon was saying. It's a completely stark contrast to what Simon was describing. There is a degree of enthusiasm within India, both at the public level and at the government level. Public level in the sense of the larger civil society. And then at the government level, there is a significant enthusiasm to what is happening in Saudi Arabia, both inside and Saudi Arabia externally. And that is visible in the way the engagements between the government of India and Saudi Arabia has increased over the past decade or so. And as far as the Global South is concerned, let me clarify. India certainly sees itself as a leader of the Global South, but it no longer sees itself only as a leader of Global South. It also wants to be viewed as part of the quote unquote first world or developed world or the broader global leadership. So it no longer sees itself as just a country which is leading the Global South. It wants to do so and also be part of the higher table. So it considers itself as a big power, as part of the global big power. As far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, and this is my personal understanding, my personal view, I don't see Saudi Arabia only leading, the Global South. And there are reasons for me to say that. One is that it is a global, leader in the sense that Islam, the second largest religion, and Saudi Arabia is recognized as a leader of the Islamic world, whether one likes it or not, that is a matter of fact. So it's not just about the global south. Secondly, when it comes to the energy, politics, again, Saudi Arabia is the leader. I mean, look at the global energy market today. It's actually largely driven by the OPEC Plus, which is basically Saudi Arabia and Russia, and then other oil producers. So, and then it is also a member of G20, and then now BRICS and other multilateral forums. So to confine Saudi Arabia only as a and the point about there was some discussion. I mean, obviously we are looking at the idea of middle power, but whether you label it as a middle power or the pinpoint as with what exactly is the middle power, as Simon was saying, it's very difficult. There is a need to kind of constantly revisit this idea, what exactly constitutes middle power. So whether you call it as a middle power or you call it as a regional power or or not, the fact remains that Saudi Arabia, through internal transformation and through its foreign policy priorities, through its foreign policy behavior, has positioned itself as a important global power in various fields, and it is trying to achieve something very important, very basic, very fundamental, and that is economic prosperity for the people of Saudi Arabia. So I think everything somehow or the other revolves to this point. You were also talking about the idea of reforms, socio-economic reforms. Fundamentally, if you look at it, it is trying to create greater opportunities for economic prosperity for the people of Saudi Arabia as well as others in the region.
Thank you, Mudassir. Let me take some questions from the audience. I'll take a combination of questions. There's from Satrio Santoso, Ateneo de Davao University in the Philippines. Yeah. And also combined with some other questions. But to Dr. Abdul Aziz, I think this is mostly to you. Saudi Arabia spends the 5th largest military budget in the world. Yeah, and you spend more than Britain and France. In fact, so a lot of people don't know that. The question is, what would be the geostrategic objective of Saudi Arabia in the region? I'm saying in the sense that if you ask me about Indonesia, what is our geostrategic objective? The number one answer would be to prevent any hegemonic power presence in Southeast Asia, right? So to prevent any hegemon from outside the region in Southeast Asia, right? That is a key geostrategic objective of Indonesia. Yeah. From Saudi Arabia's perspective, what would that be here?
Well, thank you for the question. I think Saudi Arabia have no desire to be a regional hegemony or even have ever gone through any sort of aggression against any of the neighborhood country and so. We would like to have a safe border. We would like to build our own capacity. We have a very large country geographically, more than 2 million square kilometers. And that's force us to have, and we have so many neighborhoods. We have a large neighborhood on the Red Sea, close to 1,900 kilometers, and then we have the Gulf water there. Plus, we have the neighborhood of all the other Gulf states. But at the same time, we have seen the threat that happened to us during the Iraq-Iran war on the north side, and you have seen the Houthi fighting Iran to be next door as a regional power next door. I think our war in Yemen was a war of necessity, was a war that we had to respond to that sort of a threat, and it was never, we have always enjoyed a very good relation with Yemen. We have been a great supporter of the Yemeni people and the Yemeni economy. But we need the spending, of course, because we have, as I said, a large country, many provinces, so we need to protect, whether through Navy or Coast Guard, or through the land forces capability, air force capability, air defense capability. Today, you've seen it with the drone, how little it costs and how expensive you need to have system to defend. So I don't think we are wasting the money. We are building our defense capability to protect ourselves and to be able to provide the necessary security for the other Gulf states together, where we are together on the GCC, and we have a very clear declaration on the GCC defense arrangement between us.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Jenny, FBCI. She asked, what is the Saudi Arabia's view on the world order? Do you have a status quo a view of the world order, or do you have a revisionist view of the international world order?
I think I mentioned it in my talk when I said we are not in support of the Cold War era, and we are not in support of a single hegemony. We would like to see a balance of power, and we would like to see, this is why we have maintained our good position. I think here I would like to mention, even sometime when we try to make our balanced position, how is the other power respond to that? And I remember very well last February in the Munich Security Forum, I was there, and I did ask Secretary Blinken, I said, we are trying to maintain a balance on the issue of Ukraine, whereby we have voted in the UN, we have issued our resolution in the GCC, we have supported the Ukrainian humanitarian, we have contributed to the release and also mediated the release of the prisoner. And we have never endorsed any Russian aggression against Ukraine, and we support the unity of Ukraine, but yet we don't want to cut our relation with Russia. And his answer to me, there is no balance with aggression. So I think I wish you remember what he said and apply it to the Palestinian case today, to the Israeli, when he see all that aggression from the Israeli side to the Palestinians. So anyhow, but still, as I said, we realize the US is the most important partner with us, but at the same time, we need to maintain our good relation with the different power, and we believe in multilateral and not just a single government.
Question from Calvin from Indonesia. In Southeast Asia, we pride ourselves on the success of ASEAN, as Association of Southeast Asian Nations, as a regional organization. We know many regional organizations have issues and problems and challenges. What is Saudi Arabia's take on the development of the GCC? What needs to be improved or fixed in terms of advancing the GCC as a robust regional organization from the viewpoint of Saudi Arabia? Yeah. Dr. Abdul Aziz, and of course, if Simon or Mudassir.
GCC so far have been successful, honestly, when you look at it from May 1981 until today. And by the way, we see the natural expansion for us in terms of a strong relation is the ASEAN, because it's still 65% or more of our exports from the region goes to Asia, primarily to the major four countries, but the partner, India, China, South Korea, and Japan, but also the ASEAN now is expanding. And the more growth we see in the ASEAN, the more we see expanding on the relationship. But at the same time, we understood the challenges that we had to go. One of it, of course, is the difficult geopolitical situation since 1980, the Iraq-Iran war, until the 1990, the Iraq invasion of Kuwait, then 2003, the US invasion of Iraq, and then all what happen after that one. So the geopolitical situation, it's a serious challenge that put us together. But we have a similar situation on the political system in the region. And I think also we are endorsing a full reform, but the reform has to come from the inside, and it should be gradual, and it should respond to our cultural needs, the way how we see it, and not just a stereotype somewhere and then you try to implement it or try to to apply it to the region. Economically, we moved already forward. We are not yet at the currency union, but that's also have been agreed before. And I'm sure we will see much more in terms of coherence policies, measuring the threat. We just issued recently the common vision on the regional security, because we always had somebody else telling us about our regional security. We had the MESA from the American side, which was rejected by the Iranian. We had the Russian proposal, which was rejected by the American. We had the European that focused only in maritime. We had the Chinese also proposal, and then we had the Iranian proposal. But at least this time, we have our own views of how we would like to see our regional security structure. So I think in all fronts, we will see an improvement. Maybe the speed of change that people wish to see in the region is not up to their expectation, because people in general, they like to move fast. But I think there are many governmental and bureaucratic issues, and there is a great respect in the territory here about the sovereignty decision of every country. For instance, when two of the members of the GCC wanted to normalize and have a diplomatic relation with Israel, the other country did not reject or object. We said this is their sovereign decision, they can do that. But at least we have a common vision in our foreign policy, in our defense issues, and in our security. And we are trying to develop a great interoperability on the defense side, whereby decentralization of the forces, but centralization of the command.
Thank you. This next question is from Kiara to Dr. Mudassir. India has attached strong importance to the Middle East, and there are millions. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but there are millions of Indians who are working in countries in the Middle East. Yeah. Do you see a strong uptick in relations between India and Saudi Arabia? And is it more strategic, political, or economic?
Thank you for that question. Let me just very briefly touch upon the point about multilateralism. I mean, if you look at the Middle East region, multilateralism has not really worked. And there are many organizations, but they have not been able to effectively address challenges facing the region, with the exception of the Gulf Cooperation Council, absolutely with its own internal problems. We have seen that in the past. But when it comes to economic issues, the Gulf Cooperation Council has been much more successful. But this is not a problem only in the Middle East. I mean, with the exception of, let's say, the European Union, with its own, again, challenges, and ASEAN, which is largely focused on economic integration, multilateralism has not necessarily multilateral organizations. For example, let's take the example of South Asia. SAARC is defunct because of intra-region problems. There are other multilateral organizations which have not necessarily been very effective. I mean, India has been focusing on BIMSTEC, but this is also a very early stage to say whether it will actually be effective or not. So far as the region is concerned, the Middle East is concerned, when it comes to multilateralism, if one looks at the trends in recent years, there is a trend of unilateral initiatives. And there are two in which India and in one, Saudi Arabia is also involved. In the other, it was the India, UAE, Israel, and the United States, the I2U2. So one unilateral initiative with focus on food security and energy security. And then IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which is basically focused on connectivity. So maybe multilateral organization may not always be very effective because of their unwieldy nature. There are sovereign states. So perhaps unilateralism is one of the answers which the policymakers have come up with. Now, as far as India and the Middle East is concerned, absolutely yes. One looks at the situation, there is a significant uptick in India's engagement with the region, especially with the Gulf countries, the Arab Gulf countries. The UAE and Saudi Arabia, if you look at it, are the two countries with which India's relations have moved significantly in a very, very multifaceted way. So if one looks at, there was a time when Indian foreign policy in West Asia or East was largely focused on either Cairo or Baghdad. That was during Cold War and early, 1990s. Now, if you look at it, it is basically Abu Dhabi and Riyadh. And this is for not just in one, aspect. You have the energy relations, very, very significant. Moving into newer areas in terms of energy also, non-renewables sectors as well. You have the regular political interactions. I mean, if you look at Prime Minister Modi's external visits, foreign visits, the Middle East features most prominently among any region in the world. And that is mainly because of the economic opportunities India sees there, and also because of security. I mean, if you look at India and the Gulf region, the security of these two regions, South Asia and the Indian subcontinent and the Arabian Peninsula, it's actually linked. Whether you talk about the problem of terrorism, whether you talk about the problem of maritime security, look at the situation today, Red Sea. I mean, the most immediate impact is on the Arabian Peninsula and India. And it is the Indian Navy, which is, I mean, there are other navies also active, but Indian Navy is also very active in partnership with the regional countries. So economic, political, security, and strategic all are converging as far as India's reach to the Gulf region is concerned. And the immediate priority is Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
Thank you. Thank you. Final question, and I would welcome Professor Simon and then also Dr. Abdul Aziz to comment on this question. We referred to Dr. Abdul Aziz's remark on the question of values in Saudi foreign policy, and he underscored non-interference among others. And this is something that much of the global South countries would also relate to. Yeah. But as you know, in the West, the kind of values that are underpin their foreign policy is usually very different. Yeah, you would, it's questions about democracy and so on and so on. Yeah, I'm just wondering, does this complicate things between the West and Saudi, or it doesn't? Right. Yes. And then I would like to get Dr. Abdul Aziz comment on this as a closing question. Yeah, please, Simon.
Thank you. I was in the British Parliament just before Christmas, and one of the things that we were discussing was this topic about the salience of quote unquote Western values and quote unquote British values and democracy and human rights and all of these things, and how salient they need to be in British Western foreign policies, and what to do when there are increasingly influential actors that have different value sets. And this goes back to some of the things I was saying earlier. There were a plurality of different views. Some of them were pragmatic. Some of them were deeply problematic. But there isn't a clear sense of how to respond. And I think that in part tells us as much about the crisis of the West, the crisis of what it means to be a Western state. The UK in particular is on the wane. And that requires a lot of navel gazing, a lot of self-reflection as to how one ought to be in a position when their power is decreasing, and other states who may not necessarily subscribe to the same value sets have their power increasing. And I think that's maybe that's a question for another time about the fall of middle powers. But I think it points to some interesting tensions that we're witnessing, particularly amongst certain circles in the West and certain circles in the UK vis-a-vis Saudi, because there is an ideological tension in part that some don't know how to respond to and how to resolve. I think that the growing dominant position is one of pragmatism and acknowledgement of difference. And I think it has to be that. But there is a cabal who don't necessarily hold that view.
Thank you. Dr. Abdul Aziz?
Well, thank you, Professor Simon, and also thank you for your question. I think respect of international law is also part of our deep belief values. When we feel it's extremely important, the right of the people and also fair and justice. That's also part of our values that we believe in it. And also the human rights issue. Yes, when mistakes were made, we recognize it and we act in correcting those mistakes and also taking the necessary measures. So there is no country without a mistake, but what we are not really endorsing is a formula that can work in one of the country and try to apply it in other countries. I think the Western world need to understand that a lot of countries, they have their own social values, they have their own tradition, their own religious, their own belief. For instance, the CEDAW agreement, the CEDAW for the women rights. And so we did agree to most of it, with the exception of the certain thing. We said, no, it doesn't really fit with our, religious belief. So also, they need to respect also our views and opinion in certain issues, what we see. But I think, if we both realize what is the interest, the basic principle values are accepted between both, that we can both function. We have a different form of sharing of power, and we have a different form of presenting our views to the government. We don't have to follow the same London Day, the mail, and in doing such an approach to criticize or do something like this. I think we do have our own system and our own belief and our own culture and our own also values that we stick to. And we respect the other values.
Thank you. Thank you. Just one small question to Dr. Abdul Aziz. This is going to be a difficult question. Imagine the Saudi national football team facing the Indonesian national football team in the qualifying round of the World Cup. What do you think the score will be and who will win?
Equal.
Oh, that's a very diplomatic answer.
We both like each other, so we will have an equal.
Simon, how about Indonesia, UK?
An Indonesia win, of course.
Oh, okay. You're being too nice now. And that's not realistic. India, look, I love you, Mudassir, but India is going to beat
you should
India because
you should play cricket with India.
Yeah.
In Saudi, we start thinking about cricket play, and there is a lot of attraction in this one. You will be surprised because we have 2 million Indian in Saudi Arabia, 2.2 from Bangladesh, and then almost close to 1.8 from Pakistan. So I think anybody will do an application in Urdu, he will have a 6.5 million audience.
True, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
So Mudassir, you can beat us in cricket. We beat you in football, okay?
Yes. We agree on that.
Good. Well, I want to say thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone who's watching and who sent questions. Please stay on our emailing list. Watch the updates, and looking forward to hearing you. And engaging you in our future programs. And to all the panelists, if I can ask you to stay after we get off the Zooms because I have a few words that I want to share with you. Thank you, everybody. All the best. And assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Dino, for moderating today's discussions. And thank you also to all the distinguished panelists for sharing your valuable insights. And today's event will be available for rewatch on FPCI official YouTube channel at Secretariat FPCI. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to today's discussions. You can follow our social media handles for more information about our activities, events, and programs. And also stay tuned to our next FPCI MPSN Virtual Public Forum via Instagram or Twitter at FPC Indo. See you at the next FPCI event and enjoy the rest of your day.